Her daughter-in-law raised a wine glass and said, "She used to clean here. Now she just lingers." Jo Halberd didn't flinch. She simply reached for her purse, where the $48,000 renovation contract waited, unsigned. By morning, the quartz was canceled, the cabinets frozen, and the kitchen gutted in silence. She'd built their home with her savings. Now she was rebuilding her pride. And when they called her bitter, she let the receipts answer back. "Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe." The laughter didn't land right. It came in too sharp, too fast, like glass clinking just before it cracks. Jo was halfway through her first glass of Pinot when Erica raised hers, manicured fingers catching the kitchen's canned light, and gestured toward her across the living room with that glossy, party smile stretched too wide. "She used to clean here," Erica said, giggling as Ruby's phone camera panned to capture the group. "Now she just lingers." The guests, a blur of velvet scarves, expensive sandals, and fake empathy, gave off a ripple of tight chuckles. That laugh people use when they're not sure who's in the joke and who's under it. Jo met it with a smile so practiced it could have been carved. She even chuckled once, quietly, a sound that barely reached the rim of her wine glass. The stemware felt cold in her hand. Her knuckles whitened just slightly. Ruby, perched on the arm of the couch with her phone angled high, gave an airy "oop" and waved at the live comments. "Don't cancel her, y'all. She's just spicy tonight." Erica turned to the others. "Oh, come on. Jo knows I love her. She's part of the landscape." Landscape. Not family. Not even furniture. Just permanent background. Brad stood near the window, his thumb dragging down the news on his phone. He didn't laugh. He didn't look up. He didn't say a word. Jo tilted her glass, sipped the warm wine, and pressed the bottom of her purse open with her free hand. Inside, tucked between her wallet and a peppermint tin, was the manila folder, thick with renovation invoices and supplier quotes. $48,000 pending, all under her name. Not Erica's, not Brad's, just Jo Halberd, in black ink at the top corner. She'd brought it tonight thinking, what? That she might hand over the final sign-off? That she'd offer to cover the quartz delivery and custom pantry to support their dream home? Maybe. Once. Not now. Not after being reduced to a ghost in the house her knees once cleaned, her hips once balanced toddlers on. Jo stood without announcement and moved through the open arch into the kitchen. Half-tiled, drywall still exposed behind the range hood. Boxes of hardware lined the floor like unopened gifts, waiting on a donor. Erica's laughter faded behind her. Jo ran her fingers across the edge of the uninstalled marble slab leaning against the wall. Cold, beautiful, pointless now. The smell of spackle and sawdust still hung faint in the air, behind the floral candle Erica had lit near the sink. She reached into her purse, pulled out the folder, and opened it on the bare island frame. Her fingers tapped the unsigned line on the contractor invoice. Her initials were missing. She closed it again. "You okay, Mom?" Brad asked softly, stepping into the doorway. She turned slowly, calm and unsmiling. "Lovely evening," she said. "Erica's friends seem very sure of themselves." Brad cleared his throat, eyes falling back to his phone. "You know how she gets. She's just nervous about the house being perfect. Hosting helps her cope." Jo stepped around him, folder back in her purse. "Nothing wrong with wanting things just so, long as you're the one paying for it." He didn't respond. She let the silence stretch. "Night, Brad." He nodded. "Night, Mom." By the time she reached the driveway, the air had cooled. A breeze nudged at the edges of her cardigan. She opened her car door, slid in, and shut the world outside with a solid, final click. The engine started. Headlights lit the same sidewalk she'd once pushed strollers across. Her phone buzzed against the dash tray. She ignored it. Instead, she opened her text app and scrolled to Greg Vaughn, contractor. She typed slowly, deliberately, "Hold the cabinets. We need to talk." The contract pages spread across Jo's kitchen table like a quiet rebellion. line after line, dated and signed by her own hand. No cosigner, no shared ownership, just Joanne Halberd written in sharp, steady cursive. The figures were exact: $48,000 committed, $22,000 dispersed. Final draw, pending. Jo ran her fingers along the final signature line, still blank. That single, unscribbled inch of space held the power to stop everything. The sun poured through the window, casting shadows on the ink. Outside, a sparrow chirped. Inside, Jo's pulse matched the ticking of the kitchen clock. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Greg Vaughn. She answered on the second ring. "Jo," Greg said, voice gravel warm, familiar. "Got your message, we're paused. I didn't roll the cabinet team this morning." "Good," she replied. "Let's talk through it." "You've still got control on everything. I haven't submitted the quartz final and the tile draw is sitting here unsigned. You tell me when and how you want to move?" Jo glanced down at the invoice summary again. "You've been good to us," she said. "You've always paid on time," he replied, "and I don't move another inch without your initials. Period." "Thank you, Greg. I'll be in touch." She ended the call and picked up the first page. The numbers didn't upset her. The memory of Erica's voice. She used to clean here. Now she just lingers. That's what lit the edges of the paper in her mind. Jo tucked the folder into her tote bag and slipped on her coat. She called Dana on the way out the door. "Morning," Dana answered, already biting into something. "Bagel, cream cheese? What's up?" Jo's heels clicked across her front walk. "I've decided not to sign off." Dana didn't miss a beat. "About time. She's been twirling through that house like she earned every tile." She mocked the hands that paid for her marble. "Oh, honey," Dana muttered, chewing slowing. Time to remind her this house doesn't renovate itself. At least not without the woman who paid for the damn electrical. Jo arrived at the Halberds' house just before noon. The air was crisp, full of dry leaves and distant leaf-blower hums. Inside, the smell of freshly brewed coffee mingled with that oversweet vanilla candle Erica insisted on lighting for every guest. Erica stood at the island, laughing with two women Jo didn't recognize, new faces, but all the same energy. High gloss, high pitch, low sincerity. "Oh, Jo," Erica called. "You made it. I was just telling the girls, once we install the waterfall quartz and open up the shelving, it's going to be showroom quality." Jo smiled politely, setting her bag down next to her. "If it happens." The room fell a hair quieter, just enough for the air to tighten. Erica blinked. "Well, I mean, of course it will. The order's in, right?" Jo's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Is it?" Before Erica could answer, Jo turned to the half-finished wall, observing the rawness of the space. So much sound and money had passed through this kitchen. So little gratitude. "Can I grab you some coffee?" Erica offered. "No need. I've already had what I needed." She left without touching the folder in her bag. Back in her car, Jo opened her contact list and scrolled to Superior Stoneworks. She dialed. "Hi, this is Joanne Halberd. I need to cancel the quartz slab scheduled for the Halberd residence. Yes, that's right. No reschedule." She didn't offer a reason. She didn't owe one. That afternoon, Erica's voice cracked through the voicemail she left. "Jo, the supplier just called me." "What's going on? Why would they say you canceled?" Jo didn't reply. She just reopened the folder and with a red pen wrote 3 words in the corner of the invoice. "Pending. Indefinitely. Yours." The knock on Jo's door came sharp, fast, and early enough that the dew hadn't yet dried on her porch steps. She opened it to find Erica standing with one heel still on the welcome mat, jaw clenched, clutching her phone like it owed her answers. "Did you mess with our supplier?" she snapped. Jo raised one brow, calmly stepping aside. "Good morning to you too. I just got a call from Superior Stoneworks. They said you canceled the quartz delivery. Under your account. I had that slab picked out for months. Months." Jo walked to the kitchen without offering coffee, her robe brushing the side of the counter. "Funny," she said, reaching for her kettle. "I thought I don't make decisions around here. I just linger." Erica's breath caught audibly. "Jo, this isn't funny." "No, I imagine it's not." Brad showed up not 5 minutes later, still in a work polo, collar half crumpled. He looked like he hadn't slept. He rarely did when Erica's voice hit that pitch. "Hey, Mom," he said, trying for warm. It barely registered. Joe gestured toward the folder now sitting neatly on her table. "You'll find every invoice and payment schedule there. You're welcome to read the fine print this time." Erica stepped forward, eyes skimming the bold lines. "Why would you cancel something we're relying on? You committed to this renovation. You said you wanted to help us." "I wanted to build something for my son's family," Joe said softly. "What I didn't realize is I wasn't included in that definition." Brad rubbed the back of his neck. "We didn't mean to make you feel like—" "Like what?" Joe cut in, voice cool but firm. "Like someone who used to clean and now just lingers?" The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was earned. Ruby, of course, had her own version of the drama online before the kettle had even boiled. A post went up on her story around noon. A black screen, white text read, "When elders sabotage your renovation just because the spotlight isn't on them anymore. Boundaryless, down-generational drama." Joe saw it on Dana's phone later that afternoon while they shared lunch in Dana's sunroom surrounded by a jungle of potted succulents and unapologetic commentary. "You see this mess?" Dana scoffed, zooming in on Ruby's post. "If she spent half the energy on drywall that she does on hashtags, you'd have a finished kitchen and peace of mind." Joe smiled faintly, swirling her tea. "Passive doesn't mean powerless." Dana tapped the side of her cup with a nail-painted cardinal red. "Good, because I'm about 2 posts away from calling out that influencer on a live stream while wearing a bathrobe and truth." Later that day, Joe drove across town to Greg Vaughn's contractor office, a squat brick building with old blueprints tacked to the walls like wallpaper. The front smelled like sawdust and coffee, the kind brewed too long but always offered anyway. Greg emerged from the back with a slow, concerned smile. "Joe, you didn't have to come down. I needed to look you in the eye." He nodded and led her into his office. A large spreadsheet was pulled up on his screen, numbers cascading down with mechanical precision. "We've halted everything as requested," he said. "Cabinets, tile. No one's charged another dime since you said hold." "And Erica's not authorized on the account?" Joe asked. Greg scratched his beard. "Technically no, but there is something." He pulled out a second file, this one less organized. "She submitted a purchase request for custom pantry shelving, under your account. Looks like she used an old digital authorization form from the original project packet." Joe blinked. "So she forged my consent. I didn't process it. Was about to call you." Joe leaned back, pulse steady, mind sharper than it had been in weeks. "Send me a copy of the invoice, and hold everything. I want no one walking into that house with a tool belt unless I say so." Greg handed her the printout, Erica's digital signature bold and smug. The printer hummed with an edge of finality as Joe watched the invoice slide out, crisp black ink on bleached paper, Erica's forged signature sitting like a stain beside her own printed name. Joe didn't tremble, didn't mutter. She just stapled the 2 pages together, slipped them into a clear sleeve, and slid them into the folder that had become her quiet weapon. The forged pantry shelving request was bold, even for Erica. No conversation, no courtesy, just entitlement in digital form. She knocked on Brad's office door that evening, the one just off the mudroom where he took work calls between toddler meltdowns and Target deliveries. He looked up surprised. "Hey, Mom. Didn't know you were stopping by." Joe held up the folder. "I didn't come to visit. I came to show you something." He motioned her in. "Is this about the quartz again? Erica's been—" She opened the folder and slid the invoice across the desk. Brad's brow furrowed. "What's this?" "Your wife submitted a request for custom pantry shelving, under my name, using an old authorization form I never gave her access to." He leaned in, reading the line item totals. $3,650 for woodwork, $800 rush fee, scheduled for next week. "She thought it was covered," he said quietly. Joe didn't flinch. "So was my dignity." Brad sighed and leaned back in his chair. "I'll talk to her." "You're late," Joe said gently. "You've been late for years." He didn't argue. By the time Joe walked into the main house, Erica was already at the island, phone in one hand, glass of white wine in the other. "You could have just talked to me instead of running to Brad," she said, eyes flaring behind her faux concern. "This is starting to feel personal." Joe raised her brow. "You signed in my name. That is personal." Erica stepped forward. "I'm trying to build a home that reflects us. You think you're helping, but you're just sabotaging my dream kitchen? Your passive aggressiveness is exhausting." Joe didn't reply. She turned, walked out to her car, and drove directly to the tile supplier. "Halberd order?" she asked at the counter. The woman checked her screen. "Scheduled for delivery Friday." "Cancel it," Joe said. "Reschedule or hold?" Joe shook her head. "Cancel, fully, and email me a written confirmation." On her way out, her phone buzzed. Ruby had posted a new poll on her story. "Would you kick your MIL out of your Reno? Asking for a friend, toxic energy, yes or no?" Joe didn't even roll her eyes. She just screen captured the post and saved it to a folder labeled Documentation, Halberd. Back at home, Dana was trimming basil on her back deck. Joe sat beside her and handed her the phone. Dana scrolled, her laugh sharp. "Ruby thinks she's got influence. She's got pixels and delusion." Joe exhaled slowly, gaze fixed on the herb bed. "It's time." Dana looked up. "Time for what?" Joe reached into her purse, pulled out the renovation folder, and tapped her fingers against it. Once. "Time to repurpose some funds." The smell of ink and laminate filled the air as Dana pressed the final folder shut, her red nail tapping the fresh gold foil seal that read, "Halberd Women Rebuild Fund, established, 2024. Joe stood at the head of Dana's dining table, paperwork spread in precise rows, a legal pad marked up with arrows, signatures, and annotations. Her pen hovered above the last line of the banking agreement, and then, without ceremony, she signed. "That's it," Dana said, breath catching. "You just turned a marble countertop into a legacy." Joe didn't smile. Not quite. But her eyes had a steadiness that hadn't been there in weeks. The remaining $32,400 from the renovation fund now lived in a brand new community foundation account, earmarked for single women over 40, restoring neglected homes in Madison's older neighborhoods. Women who built from scratch and got called difficult for not smiling while doing it. "I didn't want Erica to be the last Halberd woman remembered for how she designed a kitchen," Joe said, "so I made sure she won't be." Greg arrived at Dana's place that afternoon, cap in hand, clipboard tucked under one arm. "You sure about this?" he asked Joe on the porch, lowering his voice. "This'll cut them off cold. No returns, no credits." Joe nodded. "Effective immediately. Tell them future invoices are COD and the cabinet's already ordered?" "Cancel. Reclaim what you can. I'll eat the penalty." Greg gave a low whistle. "That'll light a fire." Joe folded her arms. Let her burn through her own matches for once. That evening, Erica's inbox pinged with a new invoice from Greg. Remaining balance due, $21,615, due upon receipt. The words, "Donor funding suspended," stamped in red across the bottom. Brad found her in the hallway, pale and silent, the screen still glowing in her hand. She can't do this, right?" Erica asked, voice thin. Brad rubbed his face, jaw clenched. "She paid for it, Erica. She never transferred the account." Erica's panic morphed fast. Outrage, then near tears. "She's sabotaging me. She wants to humiliate me." Brad stood, silent. Erica turned on him. "Are you going to say something? Or are you just going to let her take it all away?" Brad looked down at the invoice again. "She didn't take anything. She just stopped giving." Later that night, he called Joe. It was the first time in weeks. "Did you do this to punish her?" Joe's voice was steady. "Number, I did this because she said I don't belong here, so I stopped funding what never included me." On the other end, silence. Before he could say anything more, Joe added, "I didn't just write checks, Brad. I gave you my hands, my time, my silence. You've both mistaken those things for things you were owed." She ended the call before he could find the words he never learned to say. The next morning, Dana slid a flyer across the table, mock-up for the scholarship's announcement launch. Reclaim, restore, rebuild, Halberd women, rebuild, empowering midlife women to start again. Jo stared at the tagline. Start again, she murmured. That's what I'm doing too. That afternoon, Ruby's followers were treated to a grainy, overly edited Instagram reel of Erica, crying softly on camera, her voice thick with faux humility. We thought we could count on her. We thought this project would bring us together. But she just walked away, and now we're stuck with an unfinished dream. Then came the link. Help us finish the dream kitchen. GoFundMe link in bio. Family fallout. Kitchen crisis. Be kind. Jo didn't watch the whole thing. She was on her porch with Dana, helping fold the first scholarship acceptance letters into envelopes. She used a brass letter opener her husband once gave her for their 30th anniversary. Dana passed her an envelope to seal. How's it feel? Jo pressed the flap closed and smiled. Like I built something that won't collapse the second someone speaks truth in it. The ring light caught the shimmer of Erica's highlighter, but it couldn't soften the fury in her voice. She pulled out without warning, Erica said, voice breathless, just trembling enough to pass as vulnerable. We were almost finished. I never imagined my own mother-in-law would sabotage her family like this. The video went up at 7:03 p.m., tagged $kitchen sabotage and family fallout. Ruby stood off camera, giving affirming hums and holding the phone just right for maximum framing. Erica's eyes glistened. A designer mug of untouched tea sat strategically in the foreground. By 7:41, the comments section exploded. Sympathy flooded in. At first. Shameful, someone typed. How could she do that to her son's home? Boomer energy at its worst, wrote another. They can't stand not being center stage. But at 8:15, Dana posted her own video. No ring light, just a beige table, a manila folder, and Dana's gravelly voice, like a cigarette that lived through divorce court. She said sabotage? Dana began, raising one brow. Let me show you sabotage. She laid out the receipts, dated emails, order cancellations, the forged invoice with Erica's signature, Jo's untouched draw release form, then a side-by-side photo of Erica's GoFundMe and the real scholarship documents. She wasn't cut off. She was given more than most ever get, and she spat on it. Jo hadn't asked Dana to post anything, but once it went up, Jo didn't stop her. Within hours, the tide turned. Wait, Erica forged a pantry invoice? This looks bad, like legally bad. Jo's the real one. I'd donate to her fund. By morning, Ruby had quietly deleted every photo with Erica from her grid. She added a post with the caption, rebranding. Some collabs don't reflect your values, and that's okay. Fresh start. Erica was livid. She's turning people against me, she hissed at Brad, holding her phone like it was cursed. Even Ruby bailed. Brad, seated at the kitchen table amid stripped wires and drywall dust, didn't lift his eyes from the envelope of unpaid bills. She's not turning people against you, he said. You filmed it. You posted it. Erica's voice cracked. You're on her side now? I'm not on anyone's side, Brad muttered, but maybe I should have picked one a long time ago. She flung her phone onto the couch where it vibrated again, this time with a notification from one of her brand partnerships. The kitchen decor company had suspended their collaboration pending clarification of legal concerns. Jo, meanwhile, sat at Dana's breakfast nook with a cup of black coffee, sunlight warming the rim of her mug. She scrolled past Erica's video without pressing play. Instead, she opened an email from a name she didn't recognize. Claire Tisdale, editor, Madison Women's Foundation. Subject line, We'd love to feature you. Inside, your recent efforts through the Halberd Women Rebuild Fund have inspired our team. Would you consider a feature in next month's issue? A story on quiet strength, community redirection, and financial boundaries. Dana leaned over Jo's shoulder and read the first few lines. Look at that, she said. Turns out the receipts bought more than backsplash. Jo didn't smile. Not yet. But she read the email twice. The walls gaped like wounds. Electrical wires dangled in midair, stiff and exposed. The space where Erica had once boasted her dream kitchen layout was now a skeleton. No countertops, no sink, just a dusty subfloor and blue painter's tape curling at the edges like regret. Greg's crew had packed up days ago. No sawdust hum, no laughter from the foreman, just the hollow echo of footsteps on plywood and the soft, maddening drip of an unconnected water line. Erica paced, arms crossed tight over her chest, phone pressed against her ear. This is ridiculous. He can't just walk away in the middle of a job. The woman at the other end of the line, from the State Contractors Board, replied with quiet authority. Ma'am, the agreement was funded by a third-party investor. That investor rescinded. You'll need to resolve this privately. Erica's mouth moved, but no sound came. She hung up, threw the phone across the butcher block island that no longer existed. Brad stood near the bay window, rubbing his eyes. You could apologize, he offered. It was limp, tired. Erica spun on him. You think that's what this is about? I'm being punished because your mother can't handle boundaries. Brad didn't argue. He rarely did anymore. That afternoon, Joe came by. Not for Erica, and certainly not for Brad. For Callie. She brought a Ziploc of snickerdoodles and a library book about volcanoes. Callie greeted her at the door with a whisper of a smile and a hug so tight Joe's ribs felt it. Mom said you're mad, Callie said as she took a cookie. Is it because the kitchen's broken? Joe knelt, letting her knees settle gently into the hardwood floor. It smelled faintly of drywall dust and citrus cleaner. I'm not mad, she said, brushing Callie's hair back. Just remembering what matters. Callie frowned. Can't you just fix it? You always fix things. Joe looked around at the cracked plaster and torn-up blueprint still taped to the fridge. She let the silence hold the answer before she spoke again. Sometimes grown-ups forget who helped build the house, she said quietly, and sometimes fixing means stopping. Callie blinked, not quite understanding, but sensing the depth of something beneath the words. She patted down the hall and returned with a sheet of construction paper. I made this at school, she said, holding it out. Joe took the paper and smiled softly. It was a crayon drawing, rough but careful, a kitchen drawn in green and yellow. A woman stood in the middle, wearing a blue sweater with Jime written across her chest in shaky handwriting. There were cookies on the counter, and next to them, a little girl with hearts above her head. Title at the top, Grandma's Kitchen. Joe traced her thumb along the waxy strokes. It smelled like glue and peanut butter. She folded it once, gently, and placed it in our purse. Thank you, she said. Her voice didn't break, but it shook. Upstairs, muffled voices broke into another argument. Erica slammed a cabinet door that hadn't been installed yet. Joe didn't pack boxes. She packed silence. 1 suitcase, 2 bags, and a cardboard file of paperwork. She loaded them into Dana's waiting trunk just after sundown. No goodbye notes, no forwarding address. The only sound was the soft thunk of the trunk latching shut, and the slow pull of gravel as they rolled down the Halberd driveway, past the half-lit porch light and the patch of dead lawn by the hydrangeas. The kitchen windows glowed dull yellow behind them. But Joe didn't look back. By morning, her bedroom sat vacant. The neatly made bed gave no clue she was never coming back. Brad stood in the foyer holding a utility bill in one hand and a letter from Greg in the other. He bent to pick up a third envelope, this one stamped Final Notice. Joe's name was still on the original billing address. Upstairs, Erica slammed a drawer and descended in her bathrobe, mascara smudged under her eyes. She left? She asked, like the idea hadn't occurred to her. Without saying anything? Brad didn't respond right away. He was staring at the invoices, flipping through them slowly, the dates stacking like dominoes. Cabinets, lighting, plumbing fixture deposits, all pending. Erica's voice cracked. She abandoned us in the middle of a renovation. Brad handed her the top envelope. She stopped living here 3 years ago. You just didn't notice. Erica looked down, then up again, like a woman realizing her microphone was still on. Joe, meanwhile, stood in the doorway of her new rental, an aging duplex with creaky floorboards and narrow windows that let in slanted, generous light. Dana dropped the last tote bag inside and handed her a key. "It's not fancy," Dana said, "but the oven works, the fridge doesn't hum like a dying cow, and it's yours." Joe turned slowly in the living room, hand brushing the edge of the windowsill. "I don't need fancy. Just need real." Dana handed her a mug. "Black coffee, no sugar." "You did good," she said, folding herself onto the sunken couch with the ease of someone who never had to apologize for surviving. "And you're done now." Joe exhaled. Not relief, not sadness, just release. Her phone buzzed. "Greg Vaughn. They want to pay now. Full amount." "Too late?" Joe stared at the message. She read it once, then again. Her fingers hovered. She thought of the empty kitchen, the jagged drywall. Erica's voice saying, "She used to clean here." Joe typed back, "Joe, too empty." She hit send, put the phone face down. Outside, the wind pushed softly against the old maple out front, its branches tapping the window pane like a gentle insistence. "You're not where you were." Joe reached into her purse, pulled out the crayon drawing from Callie, Grandma's kitchen, and pinned it to the fridge with a lone magnet shaped like a tomato. Then she opened the window and let the night air in. Next morning, the magazine arrived with a whisper-soft thud on Joe's new welcome mat. White script on forest green, still standing. She bent to pick it up, brushing dust from the cover. Midwest Women's Foundation Monthly. A young woman beamed on the front page, holding a small hammer and standing in front of a fixer-upper duplex with her sponsor beside her. Inside, on page 12, was the article Dana had insisted she agree to. Halberd Women Rebuild, a legacy of quiet power. The byline read simply, "Joe Halberd, contributor." Erica's name was never mentioned, not once. Joe read it in silence, sunlight stretching across the table, the scent of lemon oil rising faintly from the freshly wiped countertop. The essay was short, but precise. No bitterness, no grandstanding, just clarity. "I stopped funding what didn't include me. I redirected what was once silent into something that speaks loudly through impact," Greg called an hour later. "They finally reached out," he said, his voice tinged with amused disbelief. "Wanted to see if I could pick the project back up. Finish it. Pay immediately." Joe could picture Erica pacing the gutted kitchen, still camera-ready from the waist up, screaming into another email. "I'm booked solid," Greg added. 6 months out. Told them they'll need someone else." Joe chuckled under her breath. "Good. Tell them the floor still slopes." That Saturday, Callie came to visit, cradling a canvas tote stuffed with cookie cutters and a rainbow apron. Her sneakers thumped across Joe's uneven tile as she raced toward the kitchen. Joe handed her a bowl of softened butter and a hand mixer older than Brad. "This one's a little loud," Joe said, "but it still gets the job done." Callie grinned. "Like you?" Joe raised a brow. "Watch it, kid." They mixed frosting in mismatched bowls, mint green, cotton candy pink, sky blue. Powdered sugar floated in the air like fog. Callie's laughter bounced off the walls. Her giggles sounded like wind chimes. Light, spontaneous, impossible to ignore. By the time the cookies cooled, both their hands were sticky and streaked with icing. Callie climbed onto a step stool to reach the counter and looked around. "Your kitchen works better," she said simply. Joe turned from the sink, drying her hands with a dish towel. "So does my heart now." There was no performance in her voice, just the kind of truth you only earn. They sat on the floor with plates in their laps, cookie crumbs between them like confetti. Later that evening, as Joe sipped tea with Dana on the porch, the notification lit her phone. Subject: Notice of intent to dispute. Grant reallocation from Erica. Filed formally. Through a law firm she could barely afford. Dana raised an eyebrow as Joe handed her the phone. "She's really doing this?" Joe nodded once, jaw tight. "She thinks the money was hers because it touched her floors. She should have treated you better than laminate." Joe didn't reply. She didn't need to. Inside, Callie had left another note on the fridge in glitter pen. Next time, lemon bars. Joe smiled, then opened her laptop. If Erica wanted a legal fight, she'd get paperwork. Joe had kept every receipt, every clause, every signature. She clicked open the folder labeled repurposed, clean. The courtroom smelled faintly of disinfectant and paper, cold, sterile, and exact. Just like Joe wanted. She wore a charcoal gray blazer, one she hadn't touched since Harold's memorial service. Dana sat beside her, lips pursed, knitting in her lap. On Joe's other side, a leather folder containing every document that mattered. Bank transfers, contractor memos, voided checks, notarized agreements. She didn't fidget. She didn't blink much. She was the still point in a turning storm. Erica sat across the aisle, flanked by a stiff-looking attorney with gelled hair and a briefcase 2 sizes too large for the gravity of the situation. Her makeup was heavier than usual, like a mask trying to survive the heat of scrutiny. Brad sat 2 rows back, alone. When the clerk called the case number, Joe rose slowly and walked with the quiet weight of someone who'd already made peace with whatever outcome came next. The judge, middle-aged, tired, no tolerance for performance, scanned the initial filings. Plaintiff argues that defendant redirected funds from a verbal commitment to a personal foundation without consent. He read aloud. Defendant asserts the funds were never transferred, belonged solely to her, and were never contractually obligated for the home renovation. He looked up. Ms. Halberd, your response? Joe stood. Everything was in my name, she said, voice clear but without bravado. Every invoice, every payment. Nothing was filed for disbursement because I hadn't approved the final stage. There is no contract with the plaintiff. She handed her file to the bailiff. The document slid across the judge's bench like the final move in a chess match. Erica's attorney rose. This is about more than contracts, Your Honor. My client was misled. This is small claims, the judge cut in. It's about money. And right now, the money appears to be hers, not your client's. Erica opened her mouth but closed it again. Her lawyer adjusted his collar, murmured something unintelligible. Joe sat back down. Dana's knitting needles didn't pause. The gavel came down with one swift, unimpressed thud. Case dismissed with prejudice. Ms. Halberd retains all rights. No damages awarded. The room emptied quickly, murmurs rising like steam. Erica lingered at the back, shoulders caving inward. Outside the courthouse, she stood against a pillar and wiped at her eyes with the side of her wrist. The mascara streaked this time. Real. Brad shuffled forward, stopping a few feet from Joe. He didn't raise his eyes. I should have said something sooner. Joe nodded once. I noticed, she replied. Then she walked past him, past Erica, past the echo of old dynamics and unspoken apologies. She didn't look back. Dana caught up to her on the steps, sunlight catching in her white curls. Do you feel lighter? Joe didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a folded drawing. Callie's latest, a kitchen, full of mismatched chairs, warm lighting, and a figure with gray hair standing at the stove. I feel measured, Joe said. Dana nodded. Good. Let her sit in the weight of what she broke. Behind them, Erica's lawyer was already on the phone, and Erica, small against the courthouse wall, watched Joe walk away like someone realizing the house wasn't what she'd lost. It was the builder. The folding chairs wobbled slightly on the polished hardwood floor of the renovated rec center. Streamers hung loosely from exposed beams, and a handwritten sign above the podium read, Halberd Women Rebuild, First Cohort Celebration. Joe stood at the lectern, one hand resting on the edge as if anchoring herself to it. Her other hand gripped a note card with 3 bullet points she never intended to read. The applause had just died down. In the front row sat 10 young women, ages 19 to 26, each holding a folder labeled Blueprints of Independence. Their expressions ranged from nervous to radiant. Behind them stood contractors, mentors, and a few mothers who'd held things together on minimum wage and hope. Joe cleared her throat. I funded a kitchen once, she began, her voice level, but the real work started when I stopped trying to be welcome in someone else's. A ripple of quiet moved through the room. She paused, eyes sweeping the audience. This isn't charity. This is a correction, a redirection, a blueprint made new. Soft applause rose again, not thunderous, warm, knowing. She looked down at the bullet points, then crumpled the card and set it aside. My name's Jo Halberd. I'm not a philanthropist. I'm a woman who used to clean her own floors and now helps build them for others. From the side of the stage, Callie waved. Jo motioned her up. Callie climbed the steps in a little blue dress and scuffed sneakers, clutching a folded sheet of paper. Her blonde hair was caught in a slightly crooked braid, Jo's handiwork from that morning. My grandma, Callie began, reading slowly, taught me how to measure things. The crowd smiled. Not just for cookies, Callie went on, but for knowing when something is fair. She says sometimes you measure what people take, and then you stop letting them. Jo blinked rapidly and gave Callie's hand a squeeze. From the third row, Dana whispered, just loud enough for Jo to hear, and she measured you small, Erica. The jab landed without spite, just truth wrapped in velvet. Later that evening, Jo walked past the Halberd house on her way home. It loomed, half-finished and hollow-looking. The exposed beams on the kitchen extension were still wrapped in plastic. A single tarp flapped noisily in the wind. Brad had listed the guest room on a short-term rental app. Jo had seen the listing. Modern space, quiet neighborhood, perfect for professionals. She didn't knock, just walked past, her heels clicking softly against the sidewalk. At home, Dana handed her a glass of red wine and a small envelope addressed in slanted handwriting. Jo didn't recognize it first. The envelope was cream-colored, heavy like wedding stationery, but bore no return address. Just Jo's name, no mom, no Mrs. Halberd, just Jo, in Erica's careful, curated handwriting. She opened it at the kitchen table, steam rising from a chipped mug of lemon tea, her thumb smudging a faint trace of eyeliner Erica had always sworn she didn't wear. Inside, the card read simply, "Sorry, I was under stress. Thank you for everything." There was no punctuation beyond that final period, no acknowledgement of what had been said, no mention of the forged invoice, the GoFundMe, or the night Jo walked out for good. Just vague remorse packaged in polite script, like a note slipped under a hotel door. Jo stared at it for a long time, then folded the card once, sharply, and slid it into the back of the junk drawer between two orphaned batteries and a key she hadn't identified in 3 years. She didn't reply. Instead, she pulled out a roll of blueprints Erica had discarded after the redesign pivot, the original cabinet mock-ups sketched in ink and vanity, walnut finish, brass pulls, an island too large for the room. Jo rolled them up, slipped them into a poster tube, and drove them across town to the Southside Community Kitchen. The manager, a stout woman with crow's feet and a cracked voice, looked stunned. "These are beautiful," she said. "We could build around this." "They were meant for a house that couldn't hold anything real," Jo replied, brushing a curl of sawdust off the plan. "I figured someone else should get use out of them." That night, her phone buzzed with a message from Brad. Not a call, never a call. Brad. "Callie asks if you'll come by, just for a bit. She misses your cookies." Jo stared at the screen. The words sat there, guilt veiled in sweetness. She exhaled slowly and tapped out her reply. "Jo, I'll come, but I won't stay." When she arrived the next afternoon, the house smelled faintly of drywall and stale hope. The kitchen was still unfinished. No countertops, open cabinetry, one cabinet door crooked on its hinges like a hungover apology. Erica wasn't home. Callie ran to her and wrapped her arms around Jo's waist like she was anchoring a ship. "I saved a seat for you," she said proudly, tugging Jo into the dining room where a folding table stood in place of the original. On it, a box of crayons, a paper plate with a half-eaten cookie, and a drawing face down. Jo flipped it over. It was a kitchen, drawn in bold marker strokes, a window with curtains, a fridge with magnets, a counter with a bowl of lemons. And at the center, a long table with one chair clearly larger than the rest, right at the head. Jo swallowed hard. Before she could speak, the front door creaked open. Brad entered, carrying a grocery bag. They locked eyes. "Thanks for coming," he said, softly, but she didn't respond. Later, back at Dana's, Joe recounted the visit. Franny had come over with sourdough and chamomile and tucked her legs up on the couch like she owned the place. "She mailed regret," Joe said quietly. Franny raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. Not an ounce of accountability?" Joe nodded. "I filed it under late." Franny took a slow sip of her tea. "Good. We don't fix what mistreated us. We rebuild somewhere better." Outside, wind chimes clinked like measured resolve. The kitchen was still a skeleton. Exposed beams lined the ceiling like broken ribs. A single light bulb dangled by a twisted cord above where an island was supposed to be. Dust clung to the groutless floor like ash after a fire. And yet, Erica insisted on filming. "Don't pan left," she hissed at Brad, who stood reluctantly behind the phone. "Just focus on the pantry door. It still looks curated." She turned to the camera, smile too wide. "We're embracing the raw phase. Real renovation takes grit." Cut, post, captioned, transformation is messy, beauty's in the bones. But the comments weren't kind. "Wait, wasn't this started in March? Where'd the sponsor go? Girl, just say you ran out of money." Erica closed the app. Behind her, a pile of sealed boxes labeled "Handles, Brushed Brass, and Pot Filler Matte Black" collected dust beside a cracked delivery slip. Brad stepped over them and checked the mailbox. Another invoice. Another delay. "New contractor wants 43% more," he muttered, flipping the envelope, "and a 60% deposit up front." Erica didn't answer. She was already opening her laptop. Across town, Joe stood in a quiet tile shop on Atwood Avenue beside a young woman with close-cropped hair and soft eyes. Kayla Jensen, 25, first-time homeowner, first recipient of the Halberd Women Rebuild Fund. She hovered over a display of ceramic squares in muted blues and warm clay tones. Her fingertips moved gently across the samples like she was reading Braille. "I want something simple," she said. "Not cheap, just honest." Joe smiled. "Simple lasts longer than trendy. So does gratitude." They chose a sandy gray tile with a soft matte finish, unassuming but solid. When the clerk slid the invoice across the counter, Kayla reached for it but paused. "Are you sure?" she whispered. Joe placed a gentle hand on hers. "You're not asking for a gift. You earned an opportunity. That's different." Kayla nodded. "My aunt worked 2 jobs to keep us. She never got a new kitchen. I'm gonna cook for her first." Joe blinked away the burn behind her eyes. They left the shop under a gray sky that hinted at snow. Kayla hugged her goodbye with both arms, real and full, not polite. Back at Joe's rental, silence greeted her like a friend. Dana had left for the weekend, but a note sat on the kitchen counter beneath a small glass vase holding 2 daisies. "Dinner's easy. Peace never is. You've earned both." Joe smiled and set her purse down. A white envelope peeked out from between the week's mail, embossed heavy stock. She opened it slowly, hands steady now. Inside, Legacy Through Precision, Regional Recognition Series, Honoree Joanne Halberd, for establishing the Halberd Women Rebuild Fund and shaping futures with clarity, integrity, and quiet force. No speech, just a dinner, 1 line of acknowledgement. Joe folded the invitation and placed it in the center drawer of the sideboard. She didn't need applause. She had tiles and warm hands and real impact. Back on Rosewood Drive, Erica scrolled through old influencer brand emails. "We regret to inform you, at this time, we're going in another direction. Due to recent activity." No one returned her calls now, not even Ruby. Brad watched her from the hallway, arms crossed. "We should rent out the guest room," he said, "to help cover it." She didn't argue. She just sat on the cold edge of the unfinished island and stared at the empty wall where her backsplash was supposed to be. That night, Callie stayed with Joe. They made brownies from scratch, flour in their hair, chocolate smudges on their sleeves. Callie licked the spoon and beamed. "Your kitchen works better," she said. Joe kissed the top of her head. "So does my heart now." Joe hosted a bake sale with the foundation. The countertop was Formica. Pale yellow with faint flecks, edged in metal that had dulled with age. It bore a faint scorch mark near the stove from a forgotten tea kettle and a nicked corner where Dana once dropped the cast iron pan. It wasn't what Erica would call content-worthy, but it held everything they needed. Jo wiped her hands on a faded dish towel and opened the front door. The hallway buzzed with voices, laughter, and the scent of vanilla and cinnamon. The bake sale had been Dana's idea. Foundation needs community, not just donors. Now half the neighborhood stood shoulder to shoulder in Jo's rented duplex, paper plates in hand, powdered sugar in the air, warmth spreading like heat from an open oven. Callie stood behind the folding table with her apron tied crooked and a spatula sticking out of her back pocket like a sword. 2 lemon bars and a brownie, right? She asked the older woman in front of her. Make it 3, the woman winked. You upsell like a professional. Dana passed behind her with a tray. She's got her grandma's instincts, Jo smiled, refilling the coffee urn. Her hands worked automatically, measuring, slicing, serving. But her attention stretched across every sound, every face, every flicker of joy in the tiny kitchen that wasn't built for this many people, but didn't seem to mind. Franny stepped beside her, nudging a plate of scones. You lingered long enough to finish something that mattered. Jo didn't answer at first. She looked around at the folding chairs filled with laughter, the windows fogged with breath, the counter covered with handwritten labels and fingerprints. Nothing curated. Everything real. I didn't finish it, Jo said. It just kept going without apology. Callie tugged at her sleeve. Grandma? Jo leaned down. Yes, baby? Callie held a cupcake in each hand. If I have kids one day, can I bring them here? Jo's voice caught. She took a breath, steady and quiet. If it still stands, she said. It's yours. They stood like that for a moment, Callie leaning into her side, frosting dotting her chin, Jo's arm draped over her shoulders. The room smelled of cinnamon and purpose. By the entryway, Dana straightened the small bronze plaque mounted just beside the doorframe. It read, The Halberd Renovation Fund, because respect can't be installed after the fact. Someone asked about the quote. Jo didn't respond. She just poured coffee into another paper cup and slid $1 into the tip jar like everyone else. Later that night, after the last cookie was sold and the folding chairs were stacked, Jo sat on the couch with her laptop. The apartment was still warm, the kitchen light casting soft amber over clean dishes and leftover crumbs. She scrolled her email, sorting through photos from the event, and clicked over to the real estate alerts she never quite unsubscribed from. One caught her eye. New listing, Rosewood Drive, 4 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, partially renovated. The photos were familiar. Unfinished backsplash, missing cabinet doors, open wiring where pendant lights should be. Erica's house. Jo didn't click the link, didn't zoom the photo, didn't forward it. She just stared at it for a long breath, then scrolled past. The pen slid softly across the page, black ink curling into names, dates, closures. Jo sat at the kitchen table, glasses low on her nose, the will in front of her like a carefully layered recipe, equal parts legacy and restraint. She paused only once, flipping back to page 4. Line item, beneficiaries. Her lips barely moved as she read them aloud. Callie Halberd, full ownership of cookbook collection, including annotations, starter account for college or small business, discretionary access at age 21. No mention of Erica, not a trace of that last name, not in ink, not in memory. The lawyer had offered to come by in person, but Jo had declined. This wasn't a day for formalities, it was a day for trimming back what no longer grew. Outside, the spring light poured over the porch in soft gold. The garden boxes were full again, basil, cherry tomatoes, snap peas inching upward on twine. Dana emerged from the kitchen holding 2 glasses of something pink and cold, condensation trailing down her knuckles. Strawberry shrub, Dana said, because we are in fact deeply civilized women. Jo chuckled and accepted her glass. To pruning. To blooming, Dana corrected, clinking her rim to Jo's. They sat together in quiet ease, the wooden porch beneath them weathered but sturdy. A wind chime made of bent spoons tinkled gently above. In the yard, the neighborhood girls chased a ball barefoot, shrieking with delight every time it bounced toward the flower beds. A knock sounded at the gate. Jo didn't flinch. She knew the rhythm. Brad. Alone. He opened the gate slowly, holding a potted plant with both hands. Lavender, in a terracotta pot. He looked older, more tired, less defended. Dana gave Jo a look, wry, knowing, and slipped back inside without a word. Jo didn't speak first. She simply watched her son approach, watched him set the plant down at her feet, then settle into the empty porch chair beside her. He didn't ask to stay, he didn't apologize, but he didn't leave either. She leaned down, pressed her palm to the soil, still damp from the morning watering. "You never noticed the roots," she said softly. "You only ever saw the bloom." Brad stared ahead, toward the sidewalk. "I do now." A silence stretched, comfortable, then not, then comfortable again. Inside, the oven beeped. Callie's chocolate chip muffins, recipe from the 3rd baking book, the one with Jo's cursive scrawled in the margins, next to stains of vanilla and cinnamon. A legacy in flour and shorthand. Jo rose, motioned with her chin. "Help me with the plates?" Brad followed her in. The kitchen was still small, barely space for 2 people at the sink, but the table was set, 4 places. Callie was already pouring milk into glasses, humming to herself, still in her after-school uniform. Dana re-emerged, fresh flowers in a jelly jar, and placed them at the center of the table. Jo took her seat last. They passed muffins and stories, folded napkins and laughter, like communion. No one talked about renovations. No one mentioned what had been stripped or stalled. This wasn't a kitchen for showing off. It was for feeding something real. As the sun dipped low, painting amber lines across the tile floor, Jo rose to water the plant Brad had brought. She stood over it a long time, watching the water soak in. Brad didn't ask questions. He just watched her tend something living. She turned to him once more. "This," she said, "is where I bloom now." The kitchen buzzed behind her, tiny, crowded, whole. The laughter of women who had rebuilt, the hum of an oven that had never failed, the weight of a table that held stories thicker than wood. No marble, no pendant lights, no hollow veneer, just 4 chairs, and all of them filled.